A very good evening to one and all. I welcome you all to this news analysis initiative. These are the articles that are important from today's newspaper. Without any further delay, we will move on to the first one. The first article for the day, retail inflation moves up marginally to 0.7% in November. Retail inflation in India rose slightly to 0.7% in November compared to a very low 0.25% in October. Even with this increase, inflation is still extremely low and among the lowest ever recorded. Why did inflation rise a little? Mainly because fuel prices increased slightly. Fuel inflation went up to about 2.3% in November. Why is inflation still under control then? Because food prices fell sharply, prices of vegetables and pulses came down, items like potatoes, onions and tomatoes became cheaper. This pulled overall inflation down despite costlier fuel. The other key points are inflation has slowed in 7 out of the last 8 months, showing price stability. Clothing and footwear prices rose very mildly. Housing inflation stayed almost the same. No major increase in rents or housing cost. Edible oils became costlier, especially mustard and coconut oil. But this did not change the overall picture much. See, this is a very important data point which you can use it as an example. In Karnataka, 188 government schools have zero enrollment. Only one teacher in 6,675 institutes. Just note this data point. You can use it in your mains answer. This is also a very important data point which you can remember it. Nashik Kumbh Mela, National Green Tribunal says cutting off 1,700 trees in Tapovan. Next article for the day, the Indian Ocean as the cradle of a new blue economy. Let's understand this article step by step. First, the historical role of India. When UN clause was negotiated in the 1970s-80s, India stood with small and vulnerable island nations and supported the idea that the seabed beyond national control is the common heritage of mankind. This showed India's commitment to fairness, equity and shared resources, not power politics. That vision made India a natural maritime leader. Why the Indian Ocean matters today? Today, the situation is very different and much more serious. Climate change is warming and acidifying oceans. Sea levels are rising. Illegal and unregulated fishing is destroying marine life. The Indian Ocean, which supports 1/3 of humanity, is also one of the most climate vulnerable regions in the world. So, India now has a responsibility not to write new laws but to shape how oceans are used in practice. The goal is to make the Indian Ocean a zone of sustainability and cooperation, not rivalry. So the strategy contains 3 pillars. The first is the stewardship of the commons. India must treat the Indian Ocean as a shared space, not a battlefield. This means protecting marine ecosystems, conserving biodiversity, and promoting sustainable fisheries. India should lead cooperative management, not competitive exploitation. Number 2, climate resilience. Climate threats are increasing, and India can lead by creating a regional ocean resilience and innovation hub. Strengthening ocean monitoring and early warning systems. Sharing technology with small island states and African coastal nations. This is about adaptation, preparedness, and solidarity. Number 3, inclusive growth. The blue economy should benefit all Indian Ocean countries, not just a few. The opportunities should include green shipping, offshore renewable energy, sustainable aquaculture, and marine biotechnology. But this requires long-term investment and regional coordination. So the big opportunity is the current global finance momentum. At the Blue Economy and Finance Forum, 25 billion euros existing ocean investments were taken, 8.7 billion euros new commitments were also brought in. And Finance in Common Ocean Coalition, $7.5 billion per year from public development banks. And COP30 launched the One Ocean Partnership, $20 billion for ocean action by 2030. So the message is very clear. Oceans are now central to climate finance. Now, India should use this moment to create an Indian Ocean Blue Fund led by India and supported by development banks, private investors, and philanthropy, turning promises into real projects. Today, Indian Ocean debates focus on Indo-Pacific strategy, naval power, sea lanes, and security. These are important, but the article says real insecurity starts with ecological collapse. Problems like illegal fishing, coral reef destruction, climate-driven storms. It destroys livelihoods and create instability. So, security must shift from military dominance to environmental sustainability. This aligns with India's Sauhad doctrine, security and growth for all in the region. India's Navy and Coast Guard, along with civilian agencies, can improve maritime awareness, respond to disasters, and monitor ecosystems. And India also has a moral and global responsibility. The recent global developments has strengthened the India's role in COP30, G20 summit, UN Ocean Conference, and entry into biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction agreement. And India's readiness to ratify this BBNJ gives it a chance to lead on green shipping corridors, blue bonds, marine technology sharing, and responsible ocean-based carbon removal. The next article is a critical story that a chunk of the media missed. Recently, India reported strong economic growth of 8.2% in quarter 2, but at the same time, the IMF raised serious concerns about how India calculates its GDP data. The IMF gave India's national account statistics a C grade, which is very low. We have discussed this in detail multiple times. Most people didn't notice this because the media barely reported it, even though it directly questions the reliability of India's growth numbers. So the main problem is how India estimates growth in the informal sector. India does not directly measure much of the informal sector. Instead, it uses data from the organized sector as a proxy. But the informal sector still makes up around 30% of GDP, excluding the agriculture. So, the big question is this estimate accurate or just an educated guess? Okay, just an educated guess. Why is this method unreliable? This method assumes that the organized sector and informal sector grow or fall together. But this breaks down during shocks such as demonetization, introduction of GST, and COVID-19 pandemic. During these periods, the organized sector expanded. The informal sector suffered badly. Yet, because the same proxy was used, informal sector performance was overestimated, making GDP growth look stronger than it really was. Currently, quarterly GDP estimates are based on limited real data. India does not have quarterly data for many sectors, so growth figures rely heavily on assumptions, past trends, and models. Until real and updated data is available, this problem cannot be fully fixed. So the 8.2% growth number may not reflect ground reality, especially for informal workers. Can this problem be fixed soon? The government is updating the GDP base year, revising calculation methods. But even then, accurately measuring the informal sector remains very difficult. The IMF's concerns are not easy to resolve quickly. Why does this matter? This whole thing, why it is so important? Because GDP numbers guide policy, budgets, welfare, and investment. If data is weak, decisions may be flawed. Ignoring such concerns creates a false sense of economic strength. So what this article says is, yes, India may be growing fast on paper, but if a large part of the economy is being estimated rather than measured, then growth figures need to be read with caution. Strong numbers matter, but credible numbers matter even more. The next article for the day, FTAs for a start. See, India has signed over 20 free trade agreements and is negotiating several more amid rising global protectionism and higher tariffs on Indian exports. While FTAs are important tools for trade expansion, India's experience shows that agreements alone do not guarantee export growth unless supported by domestic reforms and sectoral preparedness. India's FTA experience has mixed outcomes. The first is the growing trade deficits. FTAs with ASEAN, Japan, and South Korea have led to Widening trade deficits. India's trade deficit with ASEAN rose from $10 billion to nearly $44 billion, and imports of high value capital goods grew faster than exports. The second is the structural weakness. FTAs did not adequately address non tariff barriers such as standards, certifications, and rules of origin. Agreements were not sufficiently aligned with India's sectoral strengths. Number 3. Limited domestic preparedness. Inadequate consultation with industry bodies. Poor awareness among exporters about FTA benefits, unlike partner countries that exploited tariff advantages fully. So, what is the course correction that we need? The review of older FTAs led to improvements in recent agreements, like the recent India UAE Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, which shows better balance. Non-oil trade reached about $100 billion. This indicates that well-designed FTAs combined with follow-up support can deliver gains. So, what are the current challenges and the negotiations? The first is the rising external pressures. US tariffs of up to 50% on key Indian exports. Carbon regulations like European Union's Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism affecting steel and cement sector. Second, ongoing negotiations like talks with the US, European Union, and Canada. Re-engagement with RCEP only at consultative level due to past concerns over agriculture and imports. Now, what is the way forward? Beyond signing FTAs, what should we focus upon? The first is the export competitiveness. We have to improve quality standards, certification systems, and mutual recognition. We have to invest in logistics, ports, cold chains, and trade infrastructure. The second is sector-specific strategies. Tailor negotiations for services, engineering goods, textiles, seafood, and carbon-intensive sectors. Number 3. Integration into global value chains. We have to focus on manufacturing depth, technology adoption, and scale. Number 4. Institutional support. We need market intelligence, export awareness, and policy coordination post free trade agreements. See, FTAs are only a starting point, not a guarantee of trade success. And India must complement them with domestic reforms, sector-specific strategies, and exporter support to convert market access into sustained export growth. Only then, FTAs can strengthen India's global trade position. The next article for the day, Census 2027 to cost 11,718 crore, no separate budget earmarked for National Population Register. Okay, we will look into the detail of this article. See, this is the India's first census after a gap of 16 years. And census is the bedrock of governance, planning, and democratic representation. And this exercise is crucial in the context of the changing population dynamics in India. So, the key features of Census 2027. Number 1. First digital census. Data will be collected using mobile applications and a dedicated digital portal. And there is real-time monitoring through the census management and monitoring system. Number 2. Caste enumeration. First time since independence that caste data will be collected in the census. And this is critical for making evidence-based policy making in social justice and welfare. Number 3. Census as a service. Data will be provided in clean, machine-readable, and actionable formats. This will enable faster access for ministries and states. Number 4. No separate budget for National Population Register. Unlike 2019, no allocation for updating the National Population Register. And government has also clarified that no decisions has been taken to update NPR during this census. Number 5. This is the large administrative exercise. About 18,600 technical personnel have been engaged for nearly 550 days. And enumeration to be done mainly by government teachers appointed by the states. Now, why Census 2027 is important? The first is the governance and welfare. Accurate population data is essential for targeting welfare schemes, resource allocation, and subsidy planning. Number 2. Federal finance. Census data influences finance commission transfers, interstate allocations, and local body funding. Number 3. Democratic representation. It forms the basis for delimitation of constituencies after the freeze ends. Number 4. Social justice. Caste data can strengthen affirmative action policies and assess real beneficiaries. Number 5. Economic planning. It supports evidence-based decisions on health, education, housing, employment, and urbanization. However, there are concerns and challenges associated. The first is the delay and data gap. Last census was in 2011 and leading to outdated demographic data for policy decisions. The second is the digital divide. Full digitization may exclude elderly, poor, and remote populations if it is not handled carefully. Number 3. Workload on teachers. Using of teachers as enumerators may disrupt regular education of students. Number 4. Caste data sensitivity. It risk of political misuse and social polarization if data is not handled transparently. Number 5. NPR NRC concerns. Absence of NPR budget reduces fears, but public trust and clarity remain essential. So what is the way forward? What kind of reforms do we need actually? We have to ensure data privacy and cyber security, stronger training and support for enumerators. We need transparent communication to build public trust, use census data strictly for developmental and welfare purposes, and timely release of results with user-friendly visualization tools. This is a very interesting article. Never write on anything sub judice, says CJI can't. Okay. The Chief Justice of India clearly said never write on anything that is sub judice, meaning cases that are still pending in court. He explained that writing opinionated articles or narratives while a case is being heard can create wrong impressions in public, even though judges themselves are not influenced by such writings. Now, why did this come up? This discussion happened because some newspapers published articles on a pending case involving a woman and her child allegedly pushed into Bangladesh just before the court hearing. The government lawyer complained that such articles try to build public pressure and influence opinion. So the court's concern is judges are immune to media pressure, but public perception and individual lives can be affected by half-baked or distorted reporting. And writing during an ongoing case can harm fairness even if unintentionally. So what is allowed now? Reporting facts of court proceedings is fine. Commentary, opinion or narrative building on pending cases should be avoided. Criticism after judgment is welcome because it helps in improving the justice system. The next article for the day, framework to fight fake news has been made strong, Minister. See, the government told Parliament that it has strengthened the system to tackle fake news and AI-generated deep fakes across TV, print and digital media. At the same time, it clearly said that free speech is protected under Article 19, Clause 1 of the Constitution. So, the aim is not to curb free speech, but to stop false, misleading and harmful information that can affect democracy and public order. So, how fake news is regulated in India? If you take TV channels, they follow rules under the Cable Television Networks Act. TV content cannot be obscene, defamatory, deliberately false or misleading. There is a 3-tier grievance redressal system to handle complaints. Number 2, print media, newspapers. They follow the Press Council of India's journalistic norms. The Press Council can inquire into fake or misleading news and issue warnings. Next, digital news platforms. They are governed by the IT Rules 2021, which include a code of ethics for online news and current affairs. Next, government-related fake news. A fact-check unit under the Press Information Bureau checks and flags fake news related to the government. See, regarding this article, government likely to rename MNREGA. See, it is likely to rename. Until now, government hasn't renamed. So, once it is coming up, we will take that article. Okay. The next article is Rajya Sabha resolution seeks free compulsory early childhood care. See, in Rajya Sabha, a private member's resolution was moved asking the government to extend the right to education to children aged 3 to 6 years. At present, Article 21A of the Constitution guarantees free and compulsory education only for children aged 6 to 14 years. Early childhood education, that is pre-primary, is not a fundamental right. Now, what is being proposed? Introduction of new Article 21B in the Constitution. This new article would guarantee free and compulsory early childhood care and education for children aged 3 to 6 years. And the coverage would include pre-primary education, nutrition and health services. Now, why is this important? Because this early childhood, 3 to 6 years, is the most critical stage for brain development, learning ability, emotional and physical growth. And strong foundation at this stage improves school readiness, learning outcomes and long-term human capital. And the role of Anganwadis is strengthened here because they form the backbone of this early childhood care. Anganwadis already provide nutrition, health checkups and informal preschool education. Now, making this a right would improve their quality, coverage and accountability of Anganwadi services. Already, National Education Policy 2020 talks about universalizing education from age 3 to 18. And this proposal seeks to constitutionalize that vision by giving it the status of a fundamental right. The next article for the day, UNEA adopts India's proposal on wildfire management. India has successfully pushed a global proposal on wildfire management at the United Nations Environment Assembly held in Nairobi. What is important here is the shift in thinking. So far, most countries respond to wildfires after they happen by firefighting and damage control. India argued that this approach is no longer enough. So what did India propose? India's resolution calls for a proactive approach, not a reactive one. That means early warning systems to detect fire risk in advance, better risk assessment using climate and land use data, prevention first rather than only firefighting later. So India highlighted that climate change, rising temperatures, irregular rainfall and land use changes are making wildfires more frequent and intense across the world. Because wildfires today cause ecological damage like forest, biodiversity and soil. There is economic losses, livelihoods and agriculture. There is social impacts as well like displacement and health issues. So India called these as cascading impacts, meaning one fire leading to multiple long-term problems. The next article, PF contributions on wages beyond 15,000 voluntary. Now, the government has clarified an important point about Provident Fund contributions under the new labour codes. See, PF contributions on wages above 15,000 per month are voluntary, not compulsory. Because the statutory PF ceiling remains at Rs 15,000. So, employers and employees must contribute to PF only up to Rs 15,000. If both agree, they can voluntarily contribute Provident Fund on higher wages, but there is no legal compulsion. Okay. So the next article is Postal Department plans to use drones. See, the Department of Post is planning to use drones to transport postal bags between post offices and branch post offices on selected routes. This idea has already been tested in Himachal Pradesh and the Northeast, where drones proved to be cost-effective, time-saving, environment-friendly and easy to track. That is real-time monitoring of postal bags. Based on these results, the department is now considering expanding drone usage to other suitable areas. Now, why this matters for UPSC? This shows use of emerging technology in public service delivery. And it is relevant for governance, e-governance and digital India. The next article is Union Cabinet allows export of coal. The Union Cabinet has approved a new policy that allows coal obtained through auctions to be exported. Earlier, coal bought through government auctions could be used only for specific industries like cement, steel, sponge iron and aluminium, and it is mainly for domestic use. Now, under the policy for auction of coal linkages for seamless, efficient and transparent utilization of coal, nothing but coal Sedu policy. Companies that get coal linkages through auctions can use the coal for any industrial purpose. They can export the coal, use it for captive consumption, carry out coal washing and share coal within their group companies or subsidiaries. However, one thing is not allowed. Coal cannot be resold within India. So why this matters? India is now producing large quantities of coal, 1.05 billion tons in financial year 25. The policy gives more flexibility to companies now. It supports ease of doing business and better utilization of resources. It also helps India enter the coal export market where feasible. We will take this technical textile mission. The National Technical Textiles Mission, launched by India's Ministry of Textiles, is a strategic initiative to establish India as a global leader in technical textiles, focusing on R&D, market promotion, exports and skill development. And the goal is to boost domestic market size and utilize technical textiles in sectors like infrastructure, healthcare and defense. And what is technical textiles first of all? These are specialized fabrics made for functional use, not for fashion or decoration. Okay, they are designed for strength, safety, durability, heat resistance, filtration, insulation or medical use. Example, if you take agrotech for crop covering, shading nets, in medical, surgical gowns, bandages, implants, in industrial, conveyor belts, filters, protective clothing, okay, fire resistant suits, bulletproof vest, all these are technical textiles. Now why it is important for India? Because these are high value added manufacturing. It reduces imports and boosts exports. It supports sectors like healthcare, agriculture, infrastructure and defense, and it generates employment and promotes Make in India. Okay, the next article is this. India has given the US what it calls a final trade offer, but the main fight is about tariffs, not the full trade deal. What tariffs is India worried about? Okay, the US currently charges 50% tariff on Indian goods, 25% normal reciprocal tariffs, and 25% extra penalty because India buys oil from Russia. Indian exporters say 25% is manageable but 50% is hurting badly. And what has India offered to the US? India has offered to immediately remove tariffs on walnuts and almonds, apples, some industrial goods and luxury motorcycles. But this is part of a future bilateral trade agreement and it is not immediate. So what does India want in return? They want the removal of the extra 25% penalty tariff linked to Russian oil. And this is India's top priority because exporters are losing profits. See, why is this important for UPSC? Because India-US trade relations, tariff wars and economic diplomacy, and this is also related to the geopolitics. Okay. The next article for the day is, the IT Ministry has asked VPN service providers to block websites that are leaking Indians' personal data like name, phone number, address, email and location. So what exactly is happening is, some websites allow anyone to enter an Indian mobile number and get sensitive personal data. This data appears to come from leaked databases. Such sites can still be accessed using VPNs which hide a user's identity and location. And the government's concern is these websites violate data protection and privacy laws. And anonymous access through VPNs can be misused for cybercrime, fraud, stalking and identity theft. That's why the government has asked VPN providers to block access to such sites. See, what about this virtual private networks in India? India does not ban virtual private networks, but it regulates them. In 2022, CERTAN, that is Cyber Emergency Response Team, they directed VPN providers to maintain user logs like IP address, usage details. Some VPN companies opposed this and they moved their servers outside India, but they still serve Indian users. See, why is this important for UPSC? It is linked to right to privacy, Article 21, and issues of data protection, cyber security, and digital governance. Today, there are a number of articles in business page. Okay, this is another important development. Nuclear insurance opened up. Very, very important. Okay. The cabinet has cleared major reforms in two key sectors, atomic energy and insurance, to attract large investments and modern technology. Now we look into the atomic energy laws first. India plans to expand nuclear power capacity 12 times by 2047 to meet clean energy needs. Till now, atomic energy was a near state monopoly, mainly handled by government agencies. And there is strict nuclear liability laws which scared away private and foreign companies. Now what is changing? Rules are being relaxed to allow private and foreign participation, and liability provisions will be eased to make investments safer. This will help India access foreign nuclear technology, capital and expertise. Now why it matters? Because nuclear energy is clean, stable and low carbon, and it helps India meet climate goals, energy security and net zero targets. The second sector is insurance. It is fully open to foreign investors. Earlier, FDI in insurance was capped at 74%. Now, the government plans to remove this cap completely. So, what does this mean? Foreign companies can own 100% of Indian insurance firms. This will bring more capital, better products and wider coverage. Why it matters now? Because insurance penetration in India is still low, and it will help in financial inclusion, risk protection and job creation. The next article is this. India has decided to ease business visa rules for Chinese professionals. This is a big shift in policy. After the India-China border clash in 2020, India had almost stopped Chinese business visits. Getting visas became very slow and complicated. This created problems for Indian industries that depend on Chinese technicians, especially in manufacturing and technology. And this caused huge production losses. Now, India has removed this extra bureaucratic checks, and they shortened visa approval time to under 1 month, and they allow faster entry for Chinese businesses and technical professionals. And this step comes as India is facing high US tariffs, and our Prime Minister has re-engaged diplomatically with China, and India wants to boost economic output and supply chains. So why this matters for UPSC? India-China relations, post-2020 normalization, and this shows India's pragmatic diplomacy. Political disputes on one side, economic needs on the other. See, we have already seen Thailand and Cambodia in places in news, so I'm skipping it. Okay, the next article is this. I'll keep the story short, okay? Europe is struggling with a big question. How to pay for Ukraine's war and survival for the next 2 years. European countries have already spent about $230 billion on aid for Ukraine. Most EU countries are now under high public debt. So, borrowing more money from markets is difficult and politically unpopular. Okay. Earlier, the European Union raised money by taking loans using its budget as collateral. But this increased European Union's debt and required approval from all 27 member states. And Hungary has clearly opposed this move. So, now Europe is looking at Russian money frozen in Europe. So what are these frozen assets? Frozen assets are money, property or investments that legally belong to a country, company or person, but it cannot be used, moved or sold because of the sanctions. Okay. Now, why are Russia's assets frozen? After Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, the European Union, United States and other countries imposed sanctions. As part of this, Russia's central bank money kept in foreign banks was frozen to pressure Russia economically. See, about 210 billion euros of Russian assets are frozen in Europe, and it is mostly held in Euroclear, Belgium. Okay. Now, who owns this money? The money still legally belongs to Russia, but Russia cannot access or use it as long as sanctions remain. Now, the European Union plans to keep these assets indefinitely and use the interest earned on them or use them as security for loans to help Ukraine with military and financial needs. Now, why is this controversial? Because countries like Hungary and Slovakia argue that using frozen assets violates international law and it sets a dangerous precedent and it could weaken trust in Europe's financial system. And there is a fear of legal and financial backlash. If sanctions are lifted later, Russia may demand its money back. Countries holding the assets like Belgium could face lawsuits. And the peace process concern is also there because Slovakia says using the money for weapons could undermine US peace efforts. And finally, the US also wants these frozen assets to be used later for Ukraine's reconstruction, not for war. See, above all these things, Russia's central bank has now sued Euroclear. It's where Russian assets are kept. That's all for today. Thank you all for joining. Have a happy weekend.